it's right, then it's gotta be. It's 4 a.m. and I ain't in the club with your friends and I'm down. And I open up the Snapchat, send you a message, be like, what's up? Say you're busy, music got you chicky, drinks got you fucked up. Say you change your mind, coming straight to my mind, and all I can think is I'm gonna call you a taxi. You're gonna spend so many nights in my house, you're gonna see my empty, gonna see my empty. I'm gonna call you a taxi. You're gonna spend so many nights in my house, you're gonna see my empty, gonna see my empty. I'm just gonna do it.
Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, AY. How's your day been?
Little on the high side. Well,
Yeah, I've been talking all day, anchoring so many events today. Hello? Yeah.
Ed, how you doing?
Zoom call.
Hey, I'm doing good. Are you?
I'm all right, too.
That's good. That's good.
All these organizations that are suddenly waking up to diversity and inclusion, and just
It's good times. In fact, it's just if I tell you my own perspective to it, you say, "I have come again." You know, the idea that they wrap it around the concept called diversity and inclusion makes me feel funny. You understand? It still qualifies the black folks. You know what I mean? Diversity, I'm fine. The idea that you are just trying to include us, all right, gives me some kind of
I mean, for me, it's not even more about the name. I think it's even the fact that every, hey, hi Shidera, hi Omari, is the fact that as a person of color, you are automatically wearing two caps
that's
as a diversity and inclusion champion in your organization, in addition to your 9-to-5 job. And I mean, Omari is just getting on the call. He will speak more to that. Like, I've been in so many meetings today, leading, anchoring, and talking all day, and being a trophy employee. Just talking on, trying to fill the shoe of Omari. That is but it's interesting. So, but very exhausting that you have to do two jobs when some people are actually hired to, and they are getting paid for working in diversity and inclusion group, or they're expecting you automatically because you're a person of color to also be a champion in your own group. They're turning me to a speaker right now, a speaker, a champion, wherever. And I was like, Omari is no longer here. Who's going to help me? Oh man,
we definitely got to talk because I need to hear about your day if you was in meetings all day. But
I was in the meeting all day. Like moderated events, anchor events all day, all day. Like my Friday today was more like Monday.
Your busy season's coming up February 1. That's when they really put you to work.
Yeah, Black History Month, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But good to have you both on the join our event today.
of course,
Have you been, Mario?
I've been well. I've been well actually. So it's been good. School starts for BU on Monday, so we had an extra break so that people could quarantine, either coming back from wherever they were, or just have a couple of extra days, given everything that was happening. So I'm excited by that. I got all my books, so I'm ready to go. Some of them look really interesting. Some of them I'm like, I hope we're only going to read one chapter out of this book. But it's good. Family's well. I'm good. So no complaints. No complaints.
Good to hear that. Most of your classes still virtual or?
Yeah. Some option to go in person, but like I'm not feeling a need to rush back to campus at this point since everything is virtual. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So, quick question: does anyone know who Mad Scientist is?
Who's what?
Mad Scientist. Who goes by the name? Mad?
That's Lillian.
Okay. Because I'm gatekeeping today.
Yeah, I think for the most part is these events are by invitation only, so I don't even think anyone not online invite will be able to get on. We sent out about 40 invite, I believe. So, and Chidera, how are you doing?
I'm doing well on this end. We don't take that for granted at all, given everything that's going on.
I know, right?
Yeah. And I heard a little bit of your recap of your day, but how have you and the team been generally?
The team is, are you talking about, I have so many things, NPG or?
NPG, yeah.
Okay.
How are the folks here today doing?
Yeah, the team, we starting off the year, we spent some time this week bonding since we just all new, working together as a new team. So started doing some kind of team bonding, getting to know ourselves more on a personal level to make it much easier to work together. So, and this is part of the objective to get us started for the year. So, but for the team, I think everyone is really getting excited. But maybe I don't want to speak for everybody. AY, Kenny.
Well, I'm good. Busy day, but yeah, thanking God for life, right? And happy to be here.
Happy Friday, everyone. Excited for 2021 and everything NPG has in stock. Hope everybody is having a pre-weekend night, a nice night so far.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be part of the first MPG meeting this year.
Is Ladi here yet?
Yeah, Ladi just came in, so.
Okay, on time.
Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today.
Hi, Lillian.
Hey, Kay.
All right, should we give ourselves one more minute and then we can start? I think we have 12 on the, the Ladi is here, right?
Yep.
Hey, Ladi, if you're here, just say hi because I can't even see your face.
Oh, you can't see Ladi's face?
No.
Okay.
All right. We're just gonna get started. I want to say thank you for everyone joining this meeting today. We're very excited. My name is Kayode Adifoshe. Most people call me Kay, but someone like Omari likes to call their full name, Kayode. So this is the first series of our leadership summit. This year we're doing something very different. Excuse me. The last 3 years, our leadership teams have always been really focused on strategy sessions and just within the ESCOs, the executive leadership team. But for this year, we have a new leadership team effective from January 1st. They elected and they appointed, and we also have some of our committee members, and we thought we want to do something different, take an advantage of the new virtual environment that we all find ourselves and expand our learning opportunities, expand our development opportunities, and take advantage of this period. So we thought it would be a great way to kick off the year with a leadership summit. There's a lot to learn from, so many things is lined up, and there's a lot to learn from all these great leaders that have been lined up for this event. Tonight is a panel style conversation. We have great leaders among us, Omari and Chidera, who are going to be sharing their personal stories about how their engagement at different community level and professional level has really helped in their career advancement. And tomorrow we have some other leaders that will be coming to share with us using the book, What Got You Here Will Not Get You There. And one of the reasons why we choose that, because as an organization, as an association, MPG, looking back to what we've been able to accomplish, it's been really incredible, thanks to the team of the leadership that we have. And we thought, yeah, we don't want to just sit here and be celebrating the past success. How do we get ourselves, how do we challenge ourselves? How do we inspire ourselves to move the needles and do more? So that we'll be having tomorrow. And then on Sunday, there's a whole lot of conversations within ourselves where the VP Global Strategy, Ayo, will be sharing more about our vision. I'll also be speaking on Sunday. So there's a lot to learn, and I'm looking forward to having an incredible, engaging and interactive conversation with everyone. So take your pen, ask questions. Let's make it as interactive, as engaging as possible. That being said, I will turn it over to Ladi. So Ladi is Ladi has so many caps. He wears so many hats, but I will just speak to what he is from an MPG standpoint. Ladi is our director for special projects. He's an incredible leader. We're very excited to have him to join. He's been supporting, showing up for MPG in the last 3 years, and looking at his network within Boston and outside Boston, and his leadership with NESB, which I have personally seen. I've seen a lot of his, accomplishment, and very excited to have him part of the leadership team for MPG. And he's going to be leading the conversation tonight. So, Ladi.
All right, thanks a lot for that, Kay. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone had a great week. Kind of excited. I always love leadership retreats because it's a good time to learn more about everyone and obviously set the strategy for the year. So I'm quite excited. Also excited about the two folks that I will be chatting with, Omari and Chidera, because I've obviously learned a lot from them. I think obviously Omari is going to share a lot more tonight about personal branding, which so I didn't even tell them what they were going to talk about, but I know they're experts just because I've always modeled a lot of things I've done after what they've done. So kind of excited to learn more about Omari, about just personal branding and how to elevate yourself, right? And then also from Chidera, which I served with Chidera on the NSB Boston board. I probably can say this confidently. She taught me how to use the calendar on my phone. Because normally it's like, oh, Lottie, you need to be here. I'm like, oh, really? And I'm like scrolling through emails trying to find, it's like, why don't you use what you have on your phone? So little things that you would think I should have known, but I was quite old school, but she brought me to the light. So kind of excited. So without further ado, I'll bring them back. Actually, can I get the slide that has the bios possible? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so what I'll do is, I think there's a slide that has Chidera's bio on it. Okay, thanks. So what I'll do is, obviously, I'm not an expert at telling their life story, but if I get paid, I probably would. But I think, Chidera, I'm gonna bring you up to just share in 60 seconds your current role, and if you just want to share like your past experiences with nonprofits. Your bio is on the screen so folks can kind of read and get more details on who you are. But if you want to share that, that'd be good.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. It's great to be on with NPG. As you all can probably gauge from my name, I have a special affinity for this group in particular, and I'm looking forward to just being tied in long term. And so, you know, Kay, you said earlier that Lottie wears a lot of hats. I consider Lottie a good friend, so that's a hat he wears for me, and he actually lives right across the street from me. So he's also a neighbor. Lottie shared that he and I, really our involvement together started with the National Society of Black Engineers. So we were both leaders as part of that organization for some time. And I guess in terms of kind of giving the sweep of history, professionally, I lead an organization called the Venley Institute. And essentially, we figure out how to get technology-enabled solutions to small and local businesses. And so in many ways, it's a pre-launch organization. Everything that we've done has been focused in central and western Massachusetts. Hopeful for a rollout this year. We'll see how things go given the market's rebounding. Looking at what I've done, maybe from a nonprofit perspective, kind of a through line from my pre-professional to professional career has been the National Society of Black Engineers. And so going back to my first semester at Case Western Reserve University, which is a small research university in Cleveland, Ohio, where I think it was less than 3% Black people on campus, even less once you got into the engineering disciplines. You know, one or two people spotted me really early on and said, hey, like, join NSB. It was the experience that took me to my first conference, which was in Columbus, Ohio. I saw 10,000 Black people who were, you know, engineers, all in suits. And I remember that being a transformative, life-changing experience for me. And without really realizing it, that organization was something that I would always go back to. So I became a leader in undergrad. When I moved to Boston and was searching for a community, NSB was kind of the first stop that I went to. And what revealed itself was that there was a need. You know, it's a grassroots organization. There are always opportunities to lead. So I don't think that there was necessarily an intentional engagement there. But once you kind of put your head down and start working on stuff, you can't stop, especially if there's more work to be done. So I became president of NSB. As part of that work, started partnering a lot with the National Black MBA Association, actually joined their leadership team. And out of that, we realized that there are opportunities for other diverse professional groups to collaborate together more effectively. Like at a very baseline level, we were all scheduling our biggest events on the same day. And so out of that, I became the founding co-chair of something called the Affinity Leadership Consortium. And so that was a way to convene the leaders on an ongoing basis, one for best practice exchange and calendar exchange, and then kind of this next iteration, which ironically, Lottie is actually at the center of leading, figuring out how we're building up capacity and training for these organizations ongoing. Outside of that, been involved with the World Economic Forum. Specifically, the World Economic Forum has what they call their Young Global Leaders program that usually focuses on more politically oriented individuals. So, and I'm saying that in case there's any familiarity there, but like Macron and Angela Merkel are part of that. And what they ended up realizing was that a lot of the change that they hope, or that we hope to see across the world, especially as we're facing these huge sustainability issues, that has to start from the grassroots up rather. And it won't just be policy or orientation based on, you know, these political leaders. And so they started something called the Global Shapers. I've been a part of the hub for 5 years. I believe that I'm being aged out this year, so I'm about to be too old. And outside of that, you know, still kind of indirectly involved at NSBE, but the kind of projects that I'm most actively involved with are the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, where I sit on their board of directors, and an initiative called Resilient Coders. So Resilient Coders, just to give a sentence to that, takes primarily people of color, so Black and Hispanic professionals who either have missed the kind of 18 to 22 window to go to college, or perhaps they did go to college but are in career stagnation. They're able to go through a 20-week boot camp. At the end of that 20 weeks, on average, folks who are making, you know, I think the median was something like $30,000 a year, make $90,000 at the end of that first year. And so it's an incredible initiative. It's a fun time for that program in particular because we're starting to figure out how to scale that impact nationally. That's a little bit about, I guess, my nonprofit sweep, and I'm looking forward to talking more.
Wait, I was on mute and my video's off. Okay. All right, I'm struggling with, I have 2 cameras on my laptop, so it tries to force me to use the really crappy camera, but like, nope, like I need the HD camera. So from time to time, it's going to be going back and forth. But thanks a lot for that, Shadair. I don't know how you all balance your lives, but I'm in training, so I'll figure it out. All right, so we're going to move over to Omari, which I'm excited to obviously learn more. Omari, I noticed on your bio, it doesn't have Lead Boston, so I'm hoping you can share more information about Lead Boston. So but go ahead, introduce yourself to the folks, and feel free to share any nonprofit experience that you think would be relevant.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I should have gone first, like, because Shadair is so accomplished. Like, we should have did the build up. So that's my feedback for you guys for the night already. I am thrilled to be here. I am a native of Washington, D.C., and I got my start really early on when I was in high school, and had the opportunity to serve as a lobbying chairperson for our regional student government, and then as an elected student member on our Board of Education for Prince George's County, Maryland, which at the time was the 13th largest school district in the US. And, you know, for me, that was really my first advocacy role that was mine. My parents are both community organizers and leaders. My dad's a politician, now a judge. And so, you know, from very early on, okay, Moko, all right, see, there we go. From very early on, my brothers and I were always working campaign sites, passing out information, mostly on issues. And then as we got older, a little bit on candidates as well. And that really has been the through line in my career, has been being in roles that where I have been the voice, the person that either was fighting for a seat at the table or had a seat at the table given title and position. And so I've been able to do that from a number of government boards, starting with the school board. And then when I was in Ohio, I was on our regional workforce investment board, which was a mix of the business community and nonprofit community and not-for-profit community as well, that really focused on job retraining. And then when I moved here to Boston in 2016 to join Liberty Mutual Insurance, you know, I got tapped early on to get involved with Liberty's employee resource groups and eventually became the national co-chair for that role. And so in many ways, we functioned like a nonprofit inside of this Fortune 100 corporation because we didn't have the resources fully at our disposal of a Fortune 100 corporation, which still boggles my mind. But I think is an example of how organizations will invest in an initiative mostly in name only with limited resources, but not in the same way that we do anything else. And so my first real foray, I would say, into the nonprofit space came through two organizations. One was I became the first president of the National African American Insurance Association of Boston. And actually, similar to Chidera, not my freshman year in college, but really like my freshman year in the insurance industry, I was in Atlanta at this conference with all these insurance folks, and it was Black people, all ages, and just beautiful colors and all backgrounds. And everybody's running around talking about being an African-American insurance professional. And I was like, what is that? Like, is that a thing? But being there with 300, 400 people, I was like, oh, this is absolutely a thing. And I think I went in. At that point, I had really been describing myself as an HR guy. Most of my background had been in the human resources and learning development space. And so it's been exciting and also really hard work. And so I have some shared affinity with you all for NPG of like getting something going and really making it work. And then recently, I've been a big brother with Big Brothers Big Sisters since 2016 and have been a big ambassador with them as well. And so I helped to recruit new mentors, new big sisters and big brothers to come join the organization. And after George Floyd's murder in June, started asking some different questions of the agency when I noticed they didn't immediately put out a statement. There wasn't any conversation guide that went out for how to talk to your little brother or little sister about race and what was happening in our society at that moment. And so I started doing that thing that we do sometimes where I started asking questions about what was the agency's commitment and what did that look like, and why there were no people of color on the board, why there were no Black people on the board, why there were a limited number of women on the board. And actually not with the angle of me getting on the board myself. I actually had like a list of names for people that I thought would be great. And the CEO said to me, why is your name not on this list? And I said, well, I'm at a Fortune 100 company now, but I'm leaving. And, you need some people that have like powerful companies behind them and the branding and all of that. And he was like, I'm not worried about that. I want you. And so now I'm on the board for Big Brothers Big Sisters. And it's been an interesting experience for me, both personally and then also thinking professionally, learning how a nonprofit runs and seeing it as a board member as opposed to for an existing organization with salaried staff, as opposed to my board member roles, which had mostly been volunteer staff as well. So I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions about anything else on my background as we go, and just really thrilled to be here today. Oh, sorry, Lottie, you did ask me to talk about Lead Boston. Very briefly.
I was going to remind you.
YW Boston. So last year I had the honor and privilege. I was accepted into the Lead Boston class of 2020. And if you're not familiar, the YW Boston hosts a group of 40 leaders from around the city, police officers, people from DA Rollins' office, people from corporate America, from different companies and organizations, leaders from nonprofit, higher education, K-12 education, public schools, private schools, anybody, everybody, every sector you can think of, engineers, were in this room. So 40 of us going through what they would describe as an inclusive leadership journey. And it was absolutely amazing. We would meet, the way the program is designed, you meet once a month in person for this all-day session. And then with the pandemic, we ended up meeting three times a month, collectively as a group. And each time was a deep dive into a different diversity and inclusion issue. So we spent time on immigration, we spent time on police reform, we spent time on housing and how neighborhoods were operating, what the census was doing in the city. We spent time on education and particularly looking at the pipeline for K-12 into colleges and universities in the area. And so it's just an amazing journey. If you've not been in Lead Boston, I would encourage you to apply. Transparently, they need us in the program. They need us having a seat at the table for these conversations. As many of you know, nonprofits, generally the people who work there, well-meaning, very well-intentioned, sometimes not very well-informed, mostly white, upper middle class to upper class women. And so there's several lenses that they carry into the work, but also several that are blind spots. And so us sitting at the table in those conversations really adds so much. And so I'm thrilled, Lottie, that you are in the 2021 class. I literally did a dance when I saw you yesterday before I sent you that note, but an incredible journey to go alongside the lived leadership experiences that I was having last year. And I'm so much more knowledgeable now, and also much more knowledgeable about the things that I don't know now, which I think was really one of the most critical outcomes of that program.
Thanks to the both of you. So I think obviously you've mentioned the work you all do, obviously for a paycheck, but also the ones you do for passion and to grow the community. So I think part of leadership retreats is a way to energize and excite the leaders of the organization for the next 12 months. Obviously, we don't want to tell them that it's going to be hard, but we want to paint the rosy picture, right? So can you, both of you talk about the skills that you're able to bring from your workplace into running a nonprofit, but also how, like, pretty much skills transfer, right? So what is able to move across the nonprofit lines, and what can you bring from the corporate to leading a nonprofit to be able to share? So just obviously want to make sure I keep time. I kind of suck at timekeeping, so if you let me, I will talk all day, but we'll probably spend about 3 to 5 minutes on this question. So Chidera, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can. And so the question was, what have I been able to take from corporate to nonprofit? Are you going to ask us the reverse as well, or should I just bundle it in there?
Yes, you can answer for the reverse also.
Okay, great. So I'll probably start with the other direction, because I feel like at least very early in my career, I had very few skills to speak of. And so or very narrow skills, I would say, even though engineering's fairly broad, you know, I was learning the discipline, I was learning the space. And what I found, at least in nonprofit leadership, was that those areas that would take me, 3 to 4 years, because I have to, you wait for the next promotion and the professional reviews, then you say, yeah, I want to focus on these skills. And then they'll send you to a couple of workshops, and then maybe it's another 3 or 4 years till the next, set of competencies. That within a nonprofit, especially a non-funded one, which is where I started, or ones that were completely volunteer run, they needed me, whether or not I had the skills or not, and they relied on me to find those skills really rapidly. And so it was a really great, in many ways, a safe learning environment, because everyone else is in the same shoes. There's nothing on my, college resume that said that I should have been heading up communications for the National Society of Black Engineers. Then there was, certainly nothing in my background to date that said that I should turn into the president of that organization, right? And so I'd say that really what's propelled a lot of the experiences that I've had since in my professional life has been the body of work that came from the volunteer nonprofit work, and now this kind of more fiduciary nonprofit work. Then going, and you know what, I'll note that, as a case in point, there's an organization that I worked at left, and in between my kind of assuming a couple, I guess maybe I started doing more with NSBE. There's MC, like the March for Science, and a couple other kind of key events. When I went back to that organization, my paycheck went up about 60%. So it was one of those things where I think that we sometimes also sleep on our volunteer experiences. We're the first ones to talk down what our contributions are. But if you actually put them down on paper and show them to your peers, you're doing astoundingly well. And then talking about the reverse, what do I bring to my day job, or bring from my day job to the nonprofit experience? Again, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I'd spend as much time doing infrastructure and scaling planning as I do, so focusing on a lot of go-to-market issues, I wouldn't have seen it coming. There's nothing about what I thought I was interested now or then that I would have seen as a precursor to the things that I'm like intensely focused on now. And so I mentioned early on that my organization has been working on scaling systems and scaling outreach, and large scale mobilizations also done in partnership with the DoD. Flash forward to, I mentioned the initiative Resilient Coders, where there's this really important model that cuts right to the core of diversity and equity related issues. And now we're figuring out how do you bring together pieces so you could replicate that rapidly across the country. And so that kind of thinking, that space that I'm in, I'm able to bring it to the other stuff that I'm doing now. Likewise, and I don't know if folks are familiar with the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, BECMA, but it's an organization that was born out of primarily a Federal Reserve report here in Boston that showed that the average Black family in the city of Boston net worth was about $8, while the average net worth of a white family is about $254,000. So the stark disparity, so this scrappy organization kind of bootlegged into something that's had a really tremendous impact, particularly in the past year from a policy perspective, in elevating Black businesses. Now we're in infrastructure mode. Like, how do we mobilize around congressional districts, and how do we restructure our membership model, and that stuff where it's like, oh, that's the hat I wear now. And I wouldn't have thought that I'd be the help figure out membership organization structure and bylaws and what dues would look like had it not been for what I'd done with the Black engineers. So it's kind of and the work that I'm doing every day at my day job. So, figuring out what systems for transactions might look like, for instance. So that's been a really fun full circle, how all of those ecosystems are feeding each other.
No, that's really good. And thanks for sharing. I think one thing to just mention also is leading on a nonprofit, you have almost like you have a slate that you can like make a mess, clean, make a mess, clean, make a mess. As opposed to at work, your performance reviews are gonna get dense if you don't like do what you're supposed to do. But I think on a nonprofit board, it's an opportunity for you to take on as much, see what you're good at, and then obviously sharpen your skills. So Mari, I'm gonna bring you up also to just talk about these transferable skills and how they've helped pivot you, obviously from corporate now into like, obviously running the show as Chief Imagination Officer.
Yeah, it's interesting, and listening to what you just shared, Chidera, as well. I was thinking back to my experiences in student government and high school, and I was the parliamentarian. And so being in the bylaws and Robert's Rules of Order and like that whole process side was absolutely where I was. And, I could see myself, and actually one of my first roles when I was at the Macy's company right after graduation was in compliance. And so I was working with lawyers and helping to decipher federal legislation that was impacting how Macy's was signing people up for credit cards and its loyalty programs. And I'm in the room with people with law degrees, right? Like with like a year out of college with a bachelor's degree, and having a seat at that table. And I was like, this is really cool. Like, this thrills me. What I didn't see coming in my volunteer experience working with nonprofits and not-for-profit organizations was really being able to be on the more creative side. And so I did have a role professionally as a trainer and as a facilitator. So I was going out and I was doing public speaking and kind of the impromptu nature of that. I would show up in a Macy's store or a Bloomingdale store, a day early to get set up for the training that I was doing tomorrow after a long flight cross country. And the store manager would say, oh, we've got, a group of people over here in this room. Like, can you pop in for a second and just, speak to the people? And I was like, I'm not the Pope. Like, I don't like, anyway, so I would do that and started building that skill. But I didn't think of myself really being able to use my imagination at work. And initially that was not at all my job. HR was very much around compliance and policy. And these are the things that are written. This is what you did. Does it meet the letter of the law? Like, what does that mean? And really through this work, with NIA Boston, with employee resource groups, I got to tap into a different side of my skill set, where I was designing programs, where I was moderating panels or serving as a panelist, where I was designing flyers even before there was Canva, right? Like, and just like all of these things that I got to play with, how you would set up the room if you got 100 people coming, and, you know, do you do rows of chairs, and or do you do tables and all of that? And really being able to think through, like, what are we trying to accomplish here? Do we want people to have conversations? So then we should do rounds. You know, if we want people to like really sit and absorb the information themselves, it was chair. So all of these things, and I actually professionally ended up taking on a role where I was managing recognition and award program events. It was one of my last roles that I had at Liberty Mutual. And so, you know, I had stepped out of my compliance hat, which I had built, you know, through my early volunteerism as a youth. That was my first roles in corporate America, and really where I shined right away as the guy who was, you know, really loved plugging into that and was very skilled and very adept at that, but was not the guy that you would have said from a review standpoint that he's got the innovation spirit, right? That he's going to be the one that's going to help us think outside of the box. And it was actually stepping outside of the workforce, outside of the workplace, into these other roles that were volunteer roles that really turned that side of me on. It activated a different side of my brain. And then I was able to bring that back into the workforce. So it was just, it's a kind of interesting cycle there of how that happened. I think most of us, when we go to volunteer, we have some skill set in a particular area and we're trying to grow that. And I didn't come into the volunteer space looking to develop a skill set that I did not think that I had at all. And so just a beautiful twist of fate that was how it happened for me. So, you know, I think that whole notion of remaining open to the opportunities, being able to take risk in this space, test things that you would never sign up to do that job necessarily at your company right now. But once you do it here in this space, you're like, oh, that job's a piece of cake, right? So like I can really go forward from there.
No, that was really good. Thanks. So you mentioned a couple of things. So you talked about being a risk taker, being open, obviously being flexible. I think those are really key. But you also talked about reward and recognition, obviously around one of the roles that you did. But let's talk about reward and recognition in terms of, obviously Kay is president, but we don't want Kay to be the only one recognizing and rewarding people. How can fellow board members, or what are some things you've seen on how fellow board members can reward and recognize when folks are doing a great job, and also telling folks to like, hey, you know, you need to strap up and like pull your weight?
I don't mind starting on that one because I've just got just small suggestions. You know, I think when you're trying to develop a culture of recognition, you know, I think recognition is a really important lever in teams. And sometimes we think of recognition as like being presented with the big check or the big crystal plaque, like in front of a room full of people. And, you know, for some of us, we like that. And others of us, you know, we're like, oh my God, that would just scare me to death to like be brought up in front of a room in that way. If we reframe our minds to really thinking about recognition as affirmation, I see recognition as a way to coach people. And so, you know, when you do something really well, you make a really great point in a meeting. You're someone who maybe doesn't always speak up, and you start speaking up and someone says, that was a really great point, Lottie, that you brought up in the meeting the other day. Like, that was such a pleasure to hear that from you. Someone puts together something, you know, if it's a flyer, or if it's a very well-crafted email, or if it's a PowerPoint presentation, you know, we've been spending a lot of time in the DEI space talking about microaggressions. And I think one of the counters to that is micro affirmations. And so, you know, you all as a leadership team, being able to see the ins and outs, the things that, you know, no one will necessarily laud you for publicly, as like one of your members coming back and saying like, I really like how you know, always develop the agenda for the meeting very smoothly, right? Like, but you all have the opportunity to see those things within the team and to affirm them amongst each other, and help people see skill sets and ways that they're adding value that maybe they don't always see or have a full appreciation for how they're adding value to the team.
No, thanks a lot. And I think I learned something, micro affirmations. Okay, I know microaggressions, but I'm going to use that one. So Chidera, before you come up, I think I would like you to touch on constructive criticism, right? And some strategies on how to do that. But also outside of, I mean, I think sometimes you can give constructive criticism and you're like, you know what, this person is either not hearing or they're choosing not to hear it. What are some ways, effective ways in which you can engage fellow team members to be more excited or kind of just ignite the passion for them to actually get the work done?
Sure. That's a funny question because Lottie, I think you've seen times where me in particular, where I've been effective and where I've been terribly ineffective. So I'm like laughing out loud as you say that. But I think that the starting point and a place that I like taking myself, because the reality is, and I know Lottie started this off by saying, hey, paint the sky rosy and don't let them know it's hard work. These things are, it's a lot of work. There will be weeks when you're working more on MPG related stuff than your day job. There will be times where somebody on this team without a doubt will let you down, right? And so I think a really big place for us to start is from a point of grace, like being graceful and understanding towards the other people on our team. And then also realizing, and I know Lottie's been in sessions where he's probably heard me say this expression, but particularly when there's tension in a room and we're trying to get to the core of what could be improved, it's that there are no bad guys in this conversation. It's very unlikely that there's anyone who is part of this team in particular that would intentionally or willfully hurt anybody or let anybody down or try and destroy your biggest program of the year. So once you take that off the table, I think constructive criticism turns a lot easier. It's very rare that you can come to somebody and say, hey, here's what the impact of your work was, and here's what we actually think your work could look like where things don't turn better. I had my cousin visiting this past week. She was like my first fully vaccinated family member for residency, and she brought up the example of and I guess this is like the toughest constructive criticism I've ever given, potentially, but somebody asking for a recommendation and she didn't feel comfortable lending one because of the quality of their work. And I said, hey, I've actually been there twice. One blew up in my face, but the other one was actually somebody who knew that I'd been pretty consistent about where his work could have been or what the challenges looked like. And this is somebody who, to this day, I would say that we're closer friends after that situation. When he came and asked me for a letter of recommendation, and I said, hey, you've had these challenges this past year. You've had all of these other things going on with your family life and X, Y, and Z. I'd let you down by my recommendation. You should go to somebody who's seen you at your best. And at that point, a couple things clicked for him of, him honing in on those times where he's excelled the most. And he went on to work on other projects that were more aligned with those things. So it was really cool. And then I was able to retain or establish a good friendship after that point. And so again, I think that when we start putting ourselves in a position where we're looking less at acknowledging the impact that things have on us, but then also acknowledging where people are and treating them with grace, that process turns a little bit easier.
Thanks a lot for that. So actually, this conversation is so organic. So Kay, I'm gonna request some additional time because I know we're supposed to end the discussion at 7:10, but I have some questions that I want to make sure I get out there. So I would assume Kay approved. So I want to talk real quickly about friendships and relationships. Oh, okay, I see Kay smiling, so we're good. Okay, all right. Omari, obviously, I call you Mr. Brandon Extraordinaire, so I'll come to you. But Chidera, if you could quickly talk about friendships on the board, right? So you just talked about constructive criticism. If you feel like, it's not going to work out, I think sometimes folks believe, oh, I can't do the work and I'm just going to peace out and just doing a very drop everything and leave, forgetting that tomorrow Kate, probably someone's always going to say, hey, Kate, such and such is on your board. How are they? And you're like, hey, obviously being the nice person he is, probably say, oh, you know, they're really great, as opposed to just do not hire. Like, yeah. How do you create friendships, obviously still keeping things business where, you know, outside of like, okay, we're hanging out, we need to get the work done. And also, as a third part to that question is, how do you use nonprofit boards? I don't want to make this opportunistic, but how do you leverage nonprofit boards to brand yourself and elevate in your career?
Yeah, and so I guess I'll reframe part of that. I actually don't think that there's a requirement or necessarily an upside to the friendship question. Okay. I think that it's, yeah, so I'll call it relationships, because I think it's great.
Better.
Yeah, I think it's great if you come out and find genuine friendships. Like, and I'm not saying this because you're on the line, you know that you're somebody that I genuinely consider a friend. But if you and I had left that board and, you know, there was no friendship spark, but we had a mutual respect for each other, I knew that you were somebody who was really talented in a specific area and I could count on you, that is worth wonders. And in fact, one of the reasons that we were able to build a friendship was because of that quality. I think that the way I started my career in particular, and so I was kind of in a sales technical consulting role. I didn't operate in an office. I didn't have age mates. I didn't have work friends. I had people I deeply respected, that I could count on, that had a mutual regard for me. And I think that that's kind of followed me throughout. You know, the lines turn a little bit blurry once you get into an organization like NSBE, because we start using words that go beyond friend and start using the word family. And it's kind of disingenuous once you get into the professional setting, because family doesn't fire each other. And the reality is that if push comes to shove, the organization is the one that we have the responsibility for. It's not about, you know, I'll tell a snippet of a story where I completely dropped the ball. There was, you know, somebody who should have been out of our organization way beforehand. I was not protecting the brand of the organization. And I was the president of the organization at the time. I remember thinking I'd like stick a Band-Aid by like having somebody there to half assume that guy's role, and, you know, all of this stuff. And ultimately, at least for that year, an organization that was like our largest sponsor funder dropped us. She was very gracious and intense about it, and that she invited me and Lottie to her office and, you know, tore me a new one, told me what a disappointment I was personally, because she knew me as NSBE, right? And so I think that, again, realizing that ultimately your responsibility is to the organization, that Boston's a very small town to the, you know, the point that Lottie started off with. And so when you drop the ball, you know, even though we started off by saying it's a safe space and this is a place to learn, that's all true. And if you do things that extend outside of, you know, the normal bounds of integrity or, severe underperformance, that kind of stuff can follow you too. The neat thing is, you know, we run into people in these circles and just know them from their nonprofit involvements and don't necessarily know what they do in their day job. So these are folks that ultimately want to hold you in high regard. And so I guess my advice then for this team in particular is that, again, if by the end of it, you guys are like having cookouts together on the weekends, and that's actually something that I've come to expect with some of my friends from NSBE. I think that that's great, and it shouldn't be the objective. The objective is, how do you raise the profile of NPG? How do you build up the systems that are required to take this organization national? Because I think that's the intent here, right? It was figuring out what the expansion looks like. How can you make sure that you're doing this job to the best of your ability? I'll end by saying that things come up, things in your life change. This year in particular, or the past 12 months in particular, I'd say globally have been the most intense collectively that like any of us will likely endure at the same time as other people. And so, you know, with that as backdrop, things come up. And when things come up, the best thing you can do for somebody is say, I don't got it. And because we're humans, when somebody says to you, I don't got it, their instinct is to say, I'll pick it up for you. the one of the worst things you can do, especially when other volunteers are counting on you, is to like ghost and not leave a trace and leave no message behind. Like that's a rapport killer. They never forgive you. Even the people I thought I forgave, like sometimes I'll just be like, yo, and he didn't respond to any of those emails like 10 years later. So I think, having the honest assessment for yourself and then communicating that as quickly as possible, because the best thing, the worst thing the only thing worse than you having to say, hey, can you pick this up for me, is somebody thinking you have it and you don't have it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And I think it's really key, communication. Like if you're not going to be available, I think just let folks know, hey, I'm going to be offline for the next 2 weeks, whatever it is. Obviously, we're not saying communicate, you're going to be offline, but at least have a plan. In my absence, I've done X, Y, Z, just the same way you would do at work, right? You're going to put your out of office message. Omari, I'm going to make an update to my question. So I'll add in there, expanding your professional network, but also raising the profile and brand of NPG, right? So obviously you have a lot of experience in obviously NAI, working for obviously the powerhouse that is Liberty Mutual. Now, obviously working with the Black Boston. Wait, okay, you're gonna make. Yes. Okay, Boston Wild Black. Yeah. Gosh, I should have known that. She's not gonna kill me. But just how can NPG board members grow their own professional networks, but also grow the brand of the organization?
Yeah. You know what? I got some advice early on from one of my first volunteer roles, and the advice was to always think of yourself as a board member first, and then think of your particular role, right? And so I think sometimes it becomes very easy for us to, as in an attempt for us to manage our own capacity and to really maintain our own sanity, for us to be able to say, like, that part's not my job, right? Like, I'm not the communications chair. I'm not the sponsorship chair. I'm not the finance person. And so someone's having a conversation with me about like how they sign up to be a sponsor. Like, I don't do that. Like, my thing is this thing over here. And, in that moment, you're actually damaging the brand of the organization. Because it doesn't look like the organization is united, right? Like, you're not a united front. As a leadership team, you're not marching toward the same goals. And so first and foremost, it's remembering that in that conversation, you're representing the NPG brand, like always. It doesn't matter if the person that's the communications chair ghosted you last week and didn't respond to your email, or didn't get you the flyer on the time where you thought that you needed the flyer, right? First and foremost, no matter what's going on in-house amongst you represent the NPG brand, and you want to make sure that it's always strong, it's always united, it's always forward-looking, and that you're bringing the best of NPG forward in every conversation where you are. And because NPG now is part of your identity, and especially as NPG's brand grows, it's on your resume, it might be on your LinkedIn already, right? Like, so as you are talking about the work that you're doing, particularly for the year that you all are looking to have as you're growing and expanding, more and more people will start to associate you with NPG. In rooms that I'm in now, people will ask me about being the NAIA Boston president, and what it was like getting that started, and what the work of NAIA is for the year ahead. And it's been really interesting because we're coming up to a place where I'm about to transition into our first president emeritus role, which I'm really excited about, in September, if not before. I'm trying to talk them into before, but they're not really letting me have it. But even then, like, in that role, and part of what we're talking about is like, what will be the things that I own? How will I contribute in that role? We haven't had a president emeritus before. And so when you think about like the role that you're in now, no matter what your title is, as the organization is growing and expanding and the brand becomes stronger than it already is, more and more people are going to associate you with this. And so as you grow your own professional network, know that you carry your own brand, you carry your employer brand. My father would scream if I didn't say that you carry your family brand. because that's something that's important in our culture. But just also know that you're carrying the NPG brand as well in those conversations. And so, just as you're moving, as you grow your network, as your network becomes more rich and valuable, not necessarily just in terms of, financial dollars, but in terms of the people that you have access to, the rooms that you have access to, just keep in mind while you're in that room having a conversation with that person about whatever the thing is there an opportunity for me while I'm in this room to plug NPG, right? Like whether it's my job or not, is there a moment here where it actually might make sense for me to make a connection for someone else? And that could be directly supporting the work of this group, or it could be somebody else that's on the board who is looking for an opportunity or a mentoring session or a coaching session. And here you're talking to somebody who might be the right person to help them, right? Like, and so it's those things. Just carry the identity with you. Just be aware that you're carrying it. Sometimes I think we get into trouble because we are carrying it and we forget. Like we forget that we're also the NPG person, like while we're in that conversation. So, you're carrying it with you. Just make sure that you're conscious that it's there and leverage it and utilize it as best you can to move the organization and the people in it forward.
No, that was really good. And I think obviously personal story, obviously of what tied like Omari, Kay, Chidera together. You mentioned when you're in these rooms, just remember why you're there, right? Because the first event I went to was a networking event for NPG. I saw the link. I registered. It was right next to where I worked in Back Bay. I showed up. I'm like, okay, this is nice. Contrary to other things I'd heard about other Nigerian groups. At that event, I met our largest NSB sponsor to date, right? We had a gala coming up. Hi, hello. Oh, you all work for Liberty Mutual. I could easily just have never went to that event and missed that opportunity, right? Met Kay, obviously, opportunity to get involved in NPG and other folks that I met there. So I think when you're in spaces, say that hi, hello, because you might regret not saying it, or that handshake. I mean, well, in this case, we're virtual, so send that little DM or hi chat or whatever it is. Because you just never know where you're going to meet people. It wasn't probably till a year later, I would reach out to both Kay and Omari. Hey, we're having a gala. We need sponsors. And within 2 weeks, they made magic happen. Obviously, 7 months later, 30K check. So when you're starting to brand the organization, just remember you will be in rooms. You are a board member as opposed to, oh, my role on the board is just this little position. No one's going to know that, only if you tell them. So that's really good. So as we wrap up, if you all have a book, a blog, a website that you think would be of value to board members, please go ahead and share. And then I'll open up the room for folks to ask you questions. So Chidera, do you want to go first?
I don't know about for board members. I guess I can say, what books have I found most interesting in the work that I'm doing recently? So one that I'd recommend right now is one called Grasp. It's written by Dr. Sanjay Sarma about the science behind how we learn. And I think especially as we commit to being lifelong learners and even seeing our roles in our organizations, and then whether they're nonprofit or corporations, and figuring out how we're getting people to retain information, adopt new things really quickly. Grasp has been really cool for that one. And I saw, and it's spelled GRASP. I saw green grass in the chat. And then I guess another that I read recently, and it's fiction, but that I really like, is called The Overstory. It's written by a guy named Richard Powers, and it really talks about, it seems like it's about human interaction, but it's really about trees and the living earth all around us, our course towards unsustainability. And so some of that unsustainability comes from our relationships, and parts of it have to do with how we're interacting with the planet. And it's one that I'm like, I should figure out how this impacts how I do things going forward.
Thank you. Omari, do you want to go next?
Yeah, and I'll share two. So one is Multipliers, and it's by Liz Wiseman. How the best leaders make everyone smarter. And the basic premise of it is that there are people that that you work for, and you look at teams that are really high performing teams. They're all operating at 150% of their capacity, and they're just like killing the game. And then there are other teams where you have incredibly smart people, underutilized, not at all motivated and inspired. And like, what are the key differences between them? If you don't get the book, I would just look up Liz Wiseman. She's done a couple of talks. I had the chance to meet her in person at one of the conferences and spend some time with her just chatting. And especially as a newer leader, my first director role when I was at Liberty, not at Liberty, at Macy's, like my mind was just blown from what she said, and I absolutely loved it. And then the other person I put down here is Torin Perez, who is a personal friend of mine and like life coach, but he is also a noted DEI expert. He was on LinkedIn's list of like the top DEI consultants for 2020. And he wrote a book called Who Am I to Lead? And it's actually a really simple, easy read. It's a series of essays that he wrote, and it covers so many topics. And is one of the books, like when I read it, I was glad that I read it as an experienced leader, and also was going, man, I would have had been able to glean so much from this if I had read it earlier on in my journey as well. And his is one of the books that I revisit, actually. And not just like for my one-on-one conversations with him, like while we're catching up, like, oh, what were you doing today? I was reading your book. But, and both are available. Buy direct from Torin on the list that on his website, so that he can make a little bit more money than through some of the others if you decide to purchase. But yeah, lots of really great books out there. Yeah, I will be happy with the name of that second book.
Thanks so much, Omari and Chidera. So obviously, apologies to everyone that joined us today. We're supposed to end at 7:30. Omari, Chidera, are you able to hang out for a couple more minutes for Q&A?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Good. Apologies, Kay. I know we're running over. This was supposed to shut down at 7:30, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring up Joy. I know you have a question. If you wanna go ahead and go off of the mute and ask your question.
Thank you, Laddie. It's been an interesting session. I'm drawing a thread from what Chidera said on ethics. She touched on it very lightly. I'm going to ask a direct question for Mari. Have you had a conflict of interest with a fellow board member that bordered on an ethical issue? Now, you know that in a real corporate world, you have the power to hire and fire or give an appraisal, so it's easier. But on a board where you really don't have those powers, you only have powers of influence, how did you handle it?
I think it's a great question. I think you also have to define what's a conflict of interest for you all as a board, right? Because you cross over industries and that sort of thing. I'm thinking of a situation actually that we have right now with NIA Boston. So as a newer organization, we're getting our liability insurance and all these other things. And I have a number of underwriters who are on my board. And several of them work for companies that are great for small business underwriting. And so while we're trying to make this decision, and I would say out of a 13-member board, maybe 5 are underwriters, and 6 or 7 of them work for companies that are part of the RFP process for this. And so it's actually a conversation that we're having right now, real time. It's not any direct personal benefit to anyone that's on the board. Like none of the underwriters who are on our board right now are pitching for this as like their book of business. They're not aligned to that. So it's not a direct conflict of interest in that way. But some of their organizations are sponsors. So they've given us money. And we've like announced them on LinkedIn, and some of them are not. And then some of them are companies that we're in the conversation with about becoming sponsors. And so it's this weird kind of interesting thing. The way that we're handling it right now is actually we are pushing along. We're the newest NIA chapter in our organization, Boston is, and there are right now we're in talks for 9 new chapters coming up this year. And so one of the things that I'm actually pushing for is to have our national organization do an agreement and RFP that would actually cover all the chapters, so that we won't have to do this ourselves. But it's a conversation that we're playing out right now in real time. And part of where we've landed right now is like, we're going to go with whatever the best deal is for us, really almost in a blind process. So what we're looking at is bringing in an external person who can evaluate the offers, and they would actually receive all the quotes and just present them to us in terms of pricing and all the structure and that sort of thing. So we can just make a decision based off that.
Thank you so much, guys. We do have a couple other questions here. We have one that says, what actions, steps, and recommendations do you have for new professionals striving to make an impact on the team and the organization as a whole?
Yeah, so a first one, and I'm going to throw it out as a first one because people tend to struggle with this. I've seen it time and time again, is reach out to the person who performed your role before you did. I don't know why it was always the hardest thing to bring those people together, if there's a shyness or a trepidation there, but I think you can learn so much from somebody who literally just spent the time, building those systems, building those processes, figuring out what they saw as headaches, and what worked, what didn't work. Another thing that, and I realize time is limited for people, and then we're also in this extreme virtual mode, but one thing that I felt had really accelerated my time in organizations early on was that I was doing a lot with different organizations. And so even if I wasn't necessarily in a leadership role, I was cross-pollinating, seeing what they did well and trying to bring it back to my primary efforts. I'll actually give a nod to you, Lottie, because you're very good at that. And they could be nonprofits, for-profits, big companies, small companies, but figuring out what you define as best practices and saying, let me try that back at MPG. I'd say that those are two maybe undersung qualities that really accelerate you learning faster as you're getting started.
I love that, and I love this question. Yeah, I think be curious. Like, it's not necessarily a concrete step. So I love that Chidera gave you the concrete step. But just stay curious and make sure that you're asking questions, like, in meetings, even for the things, and maybe especially for the things that are not necessarily your area and not the things that you understand. And so, don't drag down the agenda by, if it's supposed to be a 5-minute update and it ends up going over, like, don't spend an hour asking questions, like, kind of for your own knowledge and that sort of thing. But, do question things, connect with people afterwards. Connect with people beforehand if you're sending out like meeting packets in advance to say, I have a question about what's on, your third slide for this particular deck. It helps you learn the organization better. It helps you learn each other better as well. And it goes back to what I was saying about you're a board member first and then your role second. And so that really helps strengthen you as a leader of the Nigerian professionals group.
Mo, do we have any additional questions?
I do not think so. I think that's the last.
Sorry, I could ask follow-up questions if there's time, but I just don't want to be sensitive.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll take one more.
Yeah, just to follow up, because I was the one that asked that question about professionals making an impact. So I'm just going to be very honest and being in spirit of development. So spent a big chunk of my time back in Nigeria working, like about 2 years. So I moved here to do schooling. So a lot of my experience from Nigeria is just not applicable to what I'm doing right now. And to make it, I wouldn't say worse or good, so my plan was to be a product manager in the software space. However, I got a job in the engineering space, so more like marketing related, close to. So I don't have I wouldn't say like a direct person that I met. The person in my role was fired technically, so I was brought in to replace them as a product manager. So there's nobody to really learn from, and this, to be honest, they're paying me a lot of money for the work. You know what I mean? For an APM, like for us, some of us that know about this role, like APMs have a lot of big work. You got to build a product, you got to manage the product life cycle. So just a lot of challenges, trying to manage that pressure, plus trying to impress your manager and being the only black guy in the whole team. It's just, coupled with all of that, it's just very hard for me to strive to make that, I would say impact, but try to impress, yeah, that's the word, impress the team and show them why they hired me. I mean, they think I'm smart, but then I don't want to use my Nigerian skill set because I realize this is a new country, this is a new environment, this is a different world entirely.
Yeah. So I think in your case, like you might not be able to go talk to the person who was in the job before you, right? And in this case, might not be appropriate for you to do so. However, if you take the same intent, right, and think about how can I accomplish this with the people who are around? So are there critical business partners, people that your role has a relationship with that could give you feedback on how do our roles interact? What has been working well in the relationship? What's not been working well in the relationship? Where do you see the relationship going between the work products that I'm responsible for? And if you have a team that my team and I are responsible for, you know, how do you like to receive feedback? How do you like to give feedback, right? Like, so still having those onboarding conversations with people to understand, they will help to illuminate parts of the role that you're doing that maybe your manager is not thinking most critically about because it's not their most critical thing, but it might be the most, how you add the most value to some of your partners. And so that will help you understand your manager's expectations as well as your peers' expectations, and anyone that in particular is a client who's depending on you. So you might not the exact action, but you protecting the intent of the action. How can you learn about the role? Who can you talk to who will tell you, you know, the history of the role? And this is where like having a best friend at work really does come in handy, because who's going to give you the real story about what happened before you were in the role with the person that was in the role before? So whether that's like the happy hour drinks like over Zoom, and because when you get people going and you just give them the opportunity to talk, they will talk. They will tell everything. Especially our lighter complexion counterparts. They love having the tea and sharing it. So you get some people talking, make them comfortable with you, and you'll get everything that you need to know and more.
No, I honestly echo everything Omari just said. The friends within the organization are huge. And then to the extent that you can find folks either through MPG or otherwise who had a similar sticking point, you know, landing in much the same way, because your story is not, it's a hard story, but it's not a unique story. People have gone through it. And so if you can figure out how you can do what they did, but faster, it sounds like that there's an upside to that. And the only other thing that I was thinking as you were talking, one moment. The only other thing I was thinking as you were talking was, I don't know what I was thinking. Sheesh, it really escaped me that fast.
You were talking about tapping into the NPG network.
Yes, tapping into the NPG network. Oh yeah, you know what? And maybe this is a conversation for another time, but I thought it was interesting that you said, I can tell they think I'm smart, but I don't know that they know what I'm capable of. And so it's just interesting how our intuition works. So you have already assessed that there's a standard that you're measuring against. You already halfway know the answer was what I sensed when you gave that answer. And a thing that I do when I'm in those positions of, hey, I feel like people haven't realized my potential, but they're responding really well to X person because there's clearly a bar that you're measuring yourself up against. You've seen how they've interacted with certain people. And you're seeing a gap there. I study those people. And I know it's hard over Zoom, but I start figuring out, do they say something different in their emails and structure them? Are they using bullet points and communicating things maybe more effectively for this given team? But you've already noticed what some of that stuff is. And I would just literally figure out who the bar is and start figuring out if there are best practices you can kind of take from that.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Chidera, for that. Omari, Chidera, thank you so much. Obviously, thanks to everyone that's here that hung out with us for an additional 14 minutes. Well, I was about to say, like, what else are you doing on a Friday night? But I'm not going to be that rude. So I'm gonna transition over to Joy as we kind of wrap things up here. Thanks again.
Thank you, Ladi. It's been an interesting day. We literally had tons of snippets that we can feed on, and they're in the chat. I would say the theme of this year for NPG is grow deep and reach wide. So I want to especially thank Omari and Chidera for taking out time to give us their insights, very deep insights. You never have thought that they had this wide sphere of experience, especially Chidera. And Omari, I mean, you're an amazing person. I met you once and I never knew such humility packed with such years of experience in both the corporate world and a non-profit space. I want to thank you, and thank you, Chidera, for sharing very kindly what you know. And I think we need them back. Maybe we'll have a panel discussion too, if the board permits. Please feel free to take the notes. We had some notes jotted down. I think this is a recorded session. It will be made available to the participants later. Lastly, remember to come back tomorrow at 5 p.m. We have panel discussion too, with a very exciting list of participants, just like we had today. Thank you very much for coming. I will hand it over to the President Kay for any last words as we round up.
No last word. Just we're looking forward to see everyone tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be very an exciting time like this evening. So stay safe, be well, and see everyone virtually again tomorrow. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.